Ilya, it's great to see you. I have two breaking news items I want to ask you about today. The first one is your shirt. Can you tell us and why you're wearing it today?
That's called Vyshivanka. It's a Ukrainian national shirt. It's a traditional shirt with these special ornaments, which is in
embroidery.
Yes,
embroidery.
exactly. I was looking for the word. Yes. So, and there are all the different types of the shirts with different ornaments, and it's a traditional Ukrainian thing. Some years ago, one of political activists suggested that it would be a special day every year, which would be the day of Vyshivanka, when everybody in the country wears this national traditional shirt. Because obviously that's like a very traditional Ukrainian dress, but it was there for centuries. But in the Soviet times, it was considered to be something outdated, this folk, just, for some public performances, but not so fashionable. It was considered to be a sign of you being from some low circles, from the village, etc., etc. So in the times after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it became a symbol of national revival. And that's why, indeed, it was very fashionable. Everybody, literally everyone in the country is wearing this kind of things. All the girls are in the very nice dresses, which are decorated in the same fashion. So it's such a candy for an eye, to be this day in Kiev and in other cities. And also a lot of people across the world, they are wearing this today as a sign of solidarity with Ukraine. There were several parliaments, like Canadian Parliament, for example, today came to the office, all of them, all parliamentarians dressed in these Vyshivankas. So it's now a traditional, very human tradition, which I personally enjoy, and many of anti-war Russians, they also are dressed in this shirt today.
Is it a coincidence that the colors of your shirt today match the colors of the flag behind you?
Definitely not. Definitely not. Definitely not. I have two Vyshivankas like this. One is of light blue, and another is of dark blue. But dark blue is more far away from the flag. That's why I decided that today it would be light blue.
Gotcha. And so say the name again. So is it Vyshivanka?
Vyshivanka.
Vyshivanka. Okay, Vyshivanka. So I wish I had a Vyshivanka to wear today, but I am wearing, I don't know if you could see it, after our conversation last week, I am wearing my lapel pin, the flag behind me. And by the way, we're going to, I'm working with some others. You had said, oh, it's unfortunate that there's not an easy source for other people to get the flag and the lapel pin. Working on that so that others can show their solidarity. I was frankly amazed at how easy it was to find them. So we're going to, it just never occurred to me, oh, Amazon.com might be a good source, as it is.
Or eBay.com.
Or eBay, yes. The internet is an amazing thing. I discovered since we last talked. So, anyway, in future interviews, we'll talk about ways that others in the West can get flags like the one that you and I have, lapel pins like the ones you and I have, so that they can show their solidarity. I want to move on to another piece of, frankly, more breaking news, which I first learned about at about 1 o'clock Eastern this morning. I was up late working, and suddenly on Twitter, I found out that I think police or perhaps military inside of Russia were breaking down the doors of people in search of and gathering up what it said were associates of Ilya Ponomarev. What a wonderful thing to be singled out in the news in this way, being facetious, of course. Why are associates of yours, who it turns out are people in some cases you don't even know, but why are alleged associates of yours being rounded up? What's going on?
Well, Unfortunately, that's not the first raid like this. It happened in the past, and in the past there was a raid among some regional journalists. Then it was also a set of different politicians, which I knew about them, but I was not acquainted with any of them. And now they picked up another set of politicians, former deputies, and one of them was arrested for the second time because he was in the previous set, and for some reason they came to him once again, despite the fact that really we are not acquainted. And this time they even produced some fake evidence. Like we were talking with him on WhatsApp, texting messages to each other, but it's all fake, So I don't know his phone number, so we are not acquainted.
So you have never corresponded with him,
never
on WhatsApp or any other chat.
Never. Yeah.
So
and that basically this example of this fake chat. It basically discloses the reason why they are doing this. They want to spook away the deputies which are coming to participate in the next Congress of People's Deputies, which is to happen on the 8th of June. Because there are people, firstly, we have approximately 1/3 of our members which are still in Russia. And we were always advising them that in their particular case, it would be better to stay away for a while and not to expose themselves and to provoke the authorities to do something against them. But again, they are making their decisions the way they do. Maybe some of them will change their minds now, but anyway, obviously authorities, they want them not just abandon the idea of participation in the Congress. Secondly, even with those people who are outside Russia, still many of them, they have relatives in the country, some business interests, property, and whatever. And also for them, it's a strong sign. Then guys, stay home, relax, just keep this one and whatever. And I understand why, because during the Congress we are about to discuss the new constitution. It would be a finalized stage of the discussion of the transitional constitution, and then there would be a discussion on the municipal reform, which is the most profound, the most fundamental reform of the system of power that is to happen right after the change. And they definitely want to ruin this discussion, not to allow us to get to the decision point, to delegitimize the discussion. And that's a sign that they're taking us seriously, actually. So there is a little bit of positive thing in this. They are really starting to take us more and more seriously. And they do understand that if the country would get a new constitution, which is like properly adopted, voted for, discussed, and legitimized by people who were genuinely elected and not the current Duma, which was just put in place by Vladimir Putin, that it's a real political alternative. And
yes.
That by itself may provoke a certain split inside Russian elites, and that's dangerous for the stability of power inside Russia. So I think that's the reason.
I have a lot of questions. So first of all, for members of the Congress, deputies of the Congress who are inside Russia, could they in theory access something like Zoom or some other online platform to participate online, or are there things in place in Russia that would prevent them from doing that technologically?
No, technologically, that's exactly what is happening. So we are putting a certain algorithms how their identity is being disguised, so that FSB or somebody cannot pick up who the person really is, and our mandate commission of the Congress actually, supervises so that there is no fraud in this regards. But by this, they are providing anonymity for the connection. The problem is that those guys, they're usual suspects, right? Because they are known people. They are members of parliament. So it's numbered number of people.
Yes, it's a finite set.
Yeah, exactly. And by voice, by expressions, by locality, a person who is attentive enough from the broadcast obviously can figure things out. So it does not provide the absolute security. At the next Congress, because of this, we decided that we will stop the publicly available broadcast, which is a big pity, because there were a lot of people who were watching the broadcast. It was very popular. It was even more popular than our main TV channel Утро Февраля. So it really was with a great public interest. But out of security concerns, we will just make a digest where we will know that we will put only people who are outside and who agreed to this, and so that none of people who are inside Russia would get through.
But as you've said, this is probably exactly one of the goals of breaking people's doors down and roughing them up, is intimidation to try to keep people away and try to keep you from broadcasting it, because even broadcasting it exposes it to people and gets them thinking about an alternative government in Russia, and that's a threat.
I totally agree, but we need to choose between the public relations and public access and the security of the people. And security has paramount importance. We will see. We will probably discuss this at the Congress, because anyway, technically, we will do the full recording, because we need like a stenogram of the Congress, and then people are working with all the decisions, with all the amendments. Some of those amendments are being just pronounced and not put in writing, so that the editing commission of the Congress is supposed to work with the broadcast. So anyway, it would be recorded, but whether it would be publicly accessed or not, let the deputies decide themselves.
Now, you made a point, which I was going to ask you about. In some ways, the fact that that Putin's henchmen, whoever they are breaking people's doors down and roughing them up, is validation that there's fear of what the Congress is doing, which is validation of the Congress itself. But there's a flip side to this too, which is it must also make members of the Congress feel like, oh, this is good. Obviously, what we're doing is important, and that, you know, we're on a successful path. So that the members of the Congress themselves, despite the fact that there's intimidation, I assume are looking at this and saying, we're doing the right thing. We have to keep doing the right thing.
So you're right, and members of the Congress, they are very much committed people, and very idealistically motivated people.
Yes.
In the very first place to join the Congress. But as I am saying, at the end of the day, the main source of pressure is coming from the families.
Yes.
From the relatives, and those relatives, it's not that they criticize. They usually say, yeah, we share your views, but just think about the consequences. We have jobs, we have schools, we have bills to pay, we have nowhere to go to, and you are exposing us. Your only, political activity creates problem for several dozen people, and that's a threat. And just, again, decide what's more important for you, your family or your political views. And unfortunately, some people in this situation, they say, you know what, my heart is with you, will support everything, but I cannot take part.
Yes, yes. Now, let's talk about the flip side of this as well. When the Putin regime does things like this to try to stop an organized effort like the Congress, there's a world reaction as well. I mean, I learned about this on Twitter at about 1 a.m, but a few hours later, there was a story in Newsweek, for instance. I think you've done some other interviews, DW in Europe. I think you have an interview coming up with CNN. What has been the response of global media to this? Do you find that reporters are understanding the real, the hidden meaning or the hidden agenda of this, and beginning to process that in terms of the overall position of the Putin regime, and maybe it's a sign of weakness?
Actually, I feel that the media position is getting better than it was before. Because before, many journalists, they tend to hear more what the Russian liberal opposition was telling them, and the usual narrative that they heard was, we were telling that from the very beginning it was a provocation, that people should not take such risk, they should think about themselves. Those people outside Russia who are calling for this type of action, they're irresponsible and stuff like this, which to me is an absolutely wrong argument, because we are at war and we need to recognize this. And the argument that, you being outside, you shouldn't call people who are inside to do this and that. It's the wrong thing, because you need to mobilize people to fight, and not everybody who does the mobilization actually takes the fight themselves. Some people have different roles, some people manage things in the back lines, some people are in the front lines. That's the war situation, when everybody has its own niche. And I think that now, especially Western media, they're starting to get it, and that's why I think that the current view is way more balanced, and it goes as a boomerang back in the direction of already Russian liberal media, because they start to hear that in the West it's been taken, that it's the proper way to put up a fight, and now they start to deliver a more balanced position. But still, I can tell you there are bitter fights which are initiated by the Russian opposition. I now understand all those stories about Russian immigration in the past, after the civil war and the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, when there were a lot of famous stories in the Russian cultural space, when different emigres were writing letters against each other, petitioning some Western governments not to work with others, like "I am the real Tsar," not "I am the real Tsar," and like things like this. These processes are happening right now. And people all the time calling me and saying, "Oh, I received the call from that representative of Russian opposition who is saying not to work with you. How you would comment on this?" Then I'm receiving a call from another guy. Oh, it's a nightmare. I have to focus on fighting and not on all these intrigues which are happening behind our backs.
Did the meeting in Berlin, is that continuing since the meeting of Berlin? Did the meeting in Berlin help calm those kind of inner fights between the oppositionists down, or does that still continue?
I think it's the other way around. Because from one side, the public criticism went down, but this behind the closed doors stories and everything, it went significantly up, because people who are against our position of the armed resistance and stuff, they got the results of the Berlin conference as the personal defeat. And now they're calling all the European politicians just every single day, all of them, that's, what, if you're working with them, you are being associated with some extremism and terrorism and violence and whatever, and where your principles of non-violent, humanistic, whatever, and that works with many.
I want to ask you a question, and it may be naive, but we're talking about war here, right? But I sometimes wonder, is there one war going on or multiple wars? Is there a war between Russia because of the invasion of Ukraine, one war, another war of partisans against Russia fighting for independence and freedom, and then a third war of between the oppositionists themselves? Are there three wars going on, or is it all elements of one war and we're just seeing different aspects of it? Is it worth looking at it that way, as one war or three?
No, look, if we take like Russian angle of view, and not the Ukrainian angle, but Russian angle, for Russians it would definitely be one war.
Okay.
Even if we take this Putin's pitch that Russians and Ukrainians is one nation, obviously it's wrong. But nevertheless, by saying this, he is underlying the fact that even for him, it is a civil war.
Yes.
And then this fighting between Russians and Ukrainians, Russians inside Russia, Russian opposition, it's all just different fronts of the same civil war.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, for Ukraine, it's totally different. Ukraine doesn't see those partisan fights, it doesn't see these opposition fights. It's like us Ukrainians against them Russians, and that's it. No good Russians exist. So for Ukrainian situation is simple: is one front is the national liberation defensive war. Even I would say patriotic war in their case. But for Russians, it is the civil war by nature.
Mm-hmm. So one of my questions for you, after reading about these people being rounded up, because they were associates of yours, do these kind of roundups happen to round up associates of other people, or is it always just you? Are you the special guy?
Right now, I am the special guy, but every single time there is somebody who is the special guy.
Okay.
It's just that in different points in time, they have different favorite person. Depends on whom they see most dangerous for them at the moment. And at the very first place when Putin came to power, the main boogeyman was Boris Berezovsky. Actually, the guy who very much assisted Putin to come to power, who invented Putin in the very large sense. Then it was Mikhail Khodorkovsky. Then it was Alexei Navalny, and now it's my turn to be this boogeyman. But I don't know how long that would last, because in their case it was always a personality, some person with money, resources, whatever. And in our case, it's really, firstly, it's a genuine movement. Secondly, it's a movement which is connected to this international Rammstein coalition. It's connected to the actual armed forces of the real country. And that's why it's way larger than Ilya Ponomarev personally. So because I am working as a bridge, so they obviously in Russia, they try to blow this bridge. And they're using all the means possible, first of all, to discredit me, to make me toxic for interaction with, for other politicians in different countries, for the Russian opposition, even for Ukrainians, they try to do it. But with Ukrainians, it's not working at all, because all of the background checks that they run, it protects me from any kind of deliberate attack. But for the other circles, to a certain degree, it is working. So we have to fight all the time and to protect ourselves. And to maintain our position. It's not so easy.
Should we assume that you're the boogeyman versus the Congress being the boogeyman because they don't want to name the Congress? They don't want to talk about the Congress because that would make Russians aware of the Congress?
Yes, definitely. Any kind of a particular discussion about the Congress means the promotion of the Congress, and they want to avoid it. So, like, without large of a promotion, they have done all the steps in terms of putting the blame on the Congress as a structure, but they do not advertise it in public. In public, they are speaking about me personally, and that's not fair about the Congress, because in Congress I am indeed one of many. Yes, I was the author of the idea, but it's not my personal show. These are very independently minded people, the deputies. Nobody can control them. They move the way they want to move, and they talk when they want to talk. So it's impossible to manipulate them. They are not marionettes. But it's always easy in politics to identify a personality and then to hit the personality. I was always against this, and I'm fighting against this right now. But that's the habit.
I want to ask you about the timing. This is happening now. It seems like since May 9th, there was obviously Putin came off very weak on May 9th, on Victory Day. It seems like since then, Ukraine on the battlefield has been doing very well. It seems like there's more and more arms coming to Ukraine from the West. So it seems like Putin's position, including with Prigozhin, is, it seems like he's in a weaker and weaker state. Is that part of why this is happening now? Is he needs a distraction to distract Russians and the rest of the world from the war itself, and just to get their minds off of what's happening there onto something else where they feel like they can have an upper hand?
Well, obviously, it's a very pleasant idea for me what you're suggesting. I think it's a bit too much at this very moment.
Okay. All right.
What I think is a reality is that yes, there is a significant erosion of Putin's power. It's visible. And also there is a significant rise of Congress's influence, and that's also visible. But we still are in the different leagues. We are moving towards each other, but still we are in the different leagues. But nevertheless, again, for all Russians, we all studied at school, and we all know that the critical element of the success of the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 was dual power, official power and the Soviet, which was an alternative parliament. And that was the critical element of the success of the revolution. And what they see with the Congress is the embryo of this very approach. And they understand that this embryo can grow very rapidly, especially if we get support from Ukraine, Poland, and the West. And if it happens, like the West would recognize Congress and whatever, boom, it would explode. And that's why they need to kill it at this very moment. They need to actually show to all the governments which can do the recognition that it's not worth it, that it's not influential, that it's not growing, that the best days are over, that people are running away, that they are scared, that they are not committed. That's the objective, and on all fronts, they try to push this agenda forward.
I want to ask you about one last thing, and this is really for you to speak to what I've heard you talk about as a fundamental principle of the Congress, which is not to just replace the existing Constitution, for instance, but I've heard you say, and I know you can say it much better than me, that the entire system must be replaced. The nation itself, the flag, the identity, even the capital must be replaced. I want to hear you say that so other people hear it as well and understand how deep you see the necessary change as being.
No, definitely. I think that we need to do everything to avoid the scenario when the empire strikes back. With the rebels, we need to destroy this empire, the very essence of it, the very source of it. And to me, the biggest threat right now is not in the Kremlin, because it is doomed already. For me right now, actually, the biggest threat is somewhere next to Washington, D.C. Because I think that the temptation just to get rid of Putin and recognize somebody like Professor, but let them preserve the system, that's a paramount thing. That's the biggest threat what we are facing. Because the very nature of power in Russia should be changed. It has to go grassroots. It has to go in the hands of people. It has to go to the regions. All the regions need to go through the process of self-determination, whether they want to be part of one country or they want to split their ways and go separately. This is the decision that needs to be made by every single citizen of the United Country. It's a conscious decision. We need to build our nation all together as one nation on the new democratic and free principles. And the constitution is just a formalization of those principles, is just their explanation, is to get in sync what we all share, all our ideas. And that's why the Congress, because the Congress is the mediator between the popular mindset and the paper where these principles are being written to.
And the threat that you described in Washington, D.C. or outside of Washington, D.C., would that kind of support for that kind of change come simply because it's the easiest or most convenient politically versus being pragmatic and realistic about what really needs to happen?
Yeah, it's just the easiest thing to do, and then let the other generations deal with this situation. At the end of the day, even if the United States will be back to the policy of containment of Russia, it would allow to make money for the military-industrial complex, and at the same time, the main expense, the human expense, the growth expense, would not be with the United States. It would be with countries like Poland, like the Baltic states, and like Ukraine. The border countries, which would be actually doing the containment, not financially, but doing it, and that's absolutely not good for them. They do understand this, but for Americans, China is the main focus, and as soon as the immediate problem with Putin is resolved, then let the Europeans handle this. And I think it's a very short-sighted approach, because still Russia is the greatest nuclear power in the world, and it's the largest country in terms of land. It's a very powerful country, and potentially it's a very powerful country. By getting rid of Putin, it can grow in something way more serious than it is right now, and to ignore it, I think it's a very short-sighted approach.
In other words, you're describing possible procrastination, so the problems don't go away. They maybe just get kicked down, the can gets kicked down the road a little ways.
Yeah, definitely. And good, democratic, prosperous, westernized Russia can be of a great help to the humanity and can be the critical part of the whole architecture of the Western world. And in the competition with the global South, it can be playing a very important role with all the resources and with all the human resources, with the geography, with everything. Russia can be extremely valuable. But again, to go this path, you need to think not about today, and maybe not about tomorrow, but about the after tomorrow. And not so many politicians are capable of doing this.
Yeah. Well, Ilya, I want to thank you for talking with us today. Is there anything you want to add before we bring this to an end?
No, I think that's more or less it, and I also need to run.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really enjoy our discussions.
Likewise.